Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class. Today I'm going to be sharing a one-layer card featuring this gorgeous new slapstick cling stamp called Crimson Blush. And this rose stamp is definitely one I am so glad to have in my collection now. There are so many different ways to color it and so many different arrangements that you can stamp it on your card to give it a totally different look. So here's a list of all the supplies that I'll be using, but I'll pop those back up at the very end of the video so you can take a closer look at them if they'll just be on screen, and you can hit pause if you want to look at them in more detail. To start, I'm working on Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. This is cold pressed watercolor paper, and I am stamping my sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I wanted to get that sentiment in place first before I added the rose stamping around the outer perimeter of the card. Now, to give this rose a no-line watercolor effect, I wanted to stamp it in a very light water-soluble ink. So I am using Antique Linen Distress ink. I am working in the Misty, so I can stamp it a couple of times. I don't like it to be so light that I feel like I'm really straining to see where I should be painting. So I do like to do that multiple times, and I did that all the way around the perimeter of the card. Now I'm going to use my Sakura Koi Field Sketchbox watercolors to paint this in, and I will list the exact colors used at the very end of the video in the supply list that is right up on screen. So I'm going to work petal by petal. I'm going to wet that petal down. Then I'm going to take my paint and just drop that in at the area of the petal closest to the center of the rose. I'm going to keep grabbing more paint until it's at the intensity that I like. And then using mostly water on my paintbrush, I'm going to work that out towards the edge of the petal. And if I want to intensify that color while it's still wet, I'll pick up more paint on my paintbrush and just drop that in and really let the water do the work of blending it out. And I have to say, I had to refrain myself from overworking these petals. I really wanted this to have a loose, flowing look. And so I just had to say, walk away, Jill, as I was doing each petal. Now, as you paint these in, you will want to work petal by petal, and you do not want to do any petals that are touching each other on either side, because then your water and everything will just start blending into each other. So there's lots of roses and lots of petals stamped here, and you just want to keep working your way around to any petals that are not touching each other. And you just keep following that exact same step. Wet down the petal, drop in the color right closest to where the petal would be closest to the center or where another petal is overlapping it, and let that water sort of wick it away. If you need to help it move a little bit, go in with a lightly wet brush and just add a little more water to let it move. And you just keep doing that, and it's amazing. You get these beautiful roses. They're really pretty easy to do. I'm going to follow the same steps on the leaves. Now for the roses, I only used one color of paint. That's all that is needed. And for the leaves, I'm going to throw in a few other colors. So I'm starting here with just a green, sort of at the base of that leaf. Then I'm going to drop in sort of more of a yellowish green on top. And you can see that's wet, so it's just kind of blending and flowing out into the wet areas. I can come in here with a fairly dry or thirsty brush if I want to lift some of the color like I just did there. At the very tip, I dropped in a touch of yellow just to give a little interest. You saw again that thirsty brush used to sort of lift up some of that color from the center of the leaf. And the last thing I did was take a touch of the color from the rose, and on just a few of the leaves, I dropped that in along the edge while it was still wet. And that is a really fun touch. I left these little leaves that were up here near the buds to do once all of the leaves were done, so that I knew how light to keep them so that they stood out from the other leaves that were behind them. So I just kept these fairly light. That way you could see the differentiation between the leaves. And one other thing to remember as you're doing the actual roses themselves is don't be afraid to leave some white, especially as you work towards the center of the roses. To paint the background, I wet the area around the roses with water, and I'm just dropping in some blue color, even using kind of a pouncing motion to drop in that color and then let it bleed out towards that watery, where the water is already added. So just letting the water do the work and telling myself to walk away and not keep adding more and more and more. And I did that all around the outer edge of the card, but also tried to keep that center area where the sentiment was white, just for contrast and to keep that light, airy look. And that completes the card. It's actually quite simple, and stay tuned for lots of other ideas using this rose. I think it's going to be a really popular stamp. I know I just love, I've already made several cards with it and have loved how everyone has turned out. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, on our blog and website, and shop our online store. And I'll link you to all of those down in the YouTube description box below. And here's a list of all the supplies used in creating this card.